Begin the current Daf Yomi Shabbos Daf Kufnan Aleph. Begin on the bottom of Kufnan and Beis, 2 lines up at the bottom of the other. We continue to explain the halacha of our previous mission regarding machshichin, regarding waiting for nightfall by the boundary on Shabbos. This corresponds to Bakazich and Echeskel to any time that I appreciate everyone who's joining us for today's Daf. Some of this is going to speak on today's shiur are that how soon after Shabbos. First, regarding the halacha that we said regarding Tanakama, going to the end of the tchum, which is Alpayim Amas, 2,000 Amas, waiting for nightfall, regarding when is someone allowed to do that on Shabbos. Again, how soon after Shabbos, when they use something done by a Gentile for a Jew on Shabbos, if a malacha was done for a person, there's a halacha possibly of how long you have to wait, if you could ever use it, and how long you have to wait to use it. Things that may be done for a dead body on Shabbos, and things that may not be done for a dead body. Where we are machal Shabbos to save any person's life, again in contrast to a dead person where we don't do malacha, but for a live person we were machal Shabbos. The Gemara brings a few agadic teachings regarding poverty, parts of the body that break down with old age. The Gemara expounds the pasuk in Keles, starts on this daf, it continues in the next daf, talking about the deterioration of the body. Some of the key terms and concepts we're discussing in today's daf are what's called b'chtei sheyasu, which is that the amount of time that it took for the malacha to be done, which was prohibited on Shabbos, that's how long you have to wait after Shabbos till you could go ahead and have benefit from that malacha. The concept of chil of Shabbos achas k'dei shishma Shabbos is harbe, that we allow a person to have chil of Shabbos to save him, so that he could go ahead and keep many Shabbos again, in contrast to that person where we don't have that heter. The pasuk b'meisim chavshi, which is that when a person dies, he becomes chavshi in a mitzvah. A dead person is free; he doesn't do any mitzvahs, and therefore again he doesn't have that exemption. So Merachim Labris, Merachim Lab Neshamayim, we say that if someone has mercy on others, so then from Shemayim they have mercy on him. To begin the current daf, the bottom of Kofnun and Beis, 2 lines up at the bottom of the Yabit, where the Mishnah had said, after the Tanakama said his halacha, Tanakama, as we're going to discuss right now, he said that certain things you're not allowed to be machshichin al tchum, you're not allowed to wait for nightfall by the boundary, and certain things you are. And then after the Tanakama said his statement, that's where we have these words in the Mishnah, Kalam Abishal. This is the rule that Rabbi Shloimy said. Kol shani b'chulu. It says, whatever I'm allowed to go ahead and say, whatever I'm allowed to talk about on Shabbos. So those are the types of things that I'm allowed to go ahead to the boundary, to the tchum, and wait for nightfall. So you might go to the following question. Abishal ahai. On which one of the two teachings of the Tanakama is he going on that he's saying a klal, a rule? Because again, there's two statements of the Tanakama. One saying when you're not allowed, one when you're saying you are allowed. Says the Gemara like this: if you think to say there's going on the Reisha, which the Tanakama had said that what's prohibited, the opening words of the Tanakama was, now wait for nightfall by the boundary, to hire workers, to bring produce, which is to be cutting it off on Shabbos. On that, Abishal is coming along to give a general rule, and he's coming to say, this is be more expansive. Don't just say your singular statement. Let's give a klal regarding that. If that's the case, then Abishal would be saying a klal for Isser, what's prohibited. So as you continue to have a top of Kofnan Aleph and Aleph, then Kol Sha'ani Zaka B'Mirasa, this that you're saying the words of Abishal are, whatever I'm allowed to say on Shabbos, whatever I'm allowed to tell someone to do on Shabbos, I'm allowed to go ahead and wait for nightfall. No, you should have said, Kol Sha'ani Zaka B'Mirasa. Whenever I'm not allowed to say, for example, like the things that the Tanakama had said, that you're not allowed to tell your friend to hire workers from you or to bring payers on Motzei Shabbos, that's Eini Rishon B'Chashichas Miboyle. I should have said that I'm not allowed to wait for nightfall. Why are you saying in the positive, say in the negative? You're coming to give a klal in the negative. Tanakama says, you're not allowed to be machshir al tchum to bring workers to go ahead and cut your produce. Those are things because you're not allowed to say it. So you're not allowed to do it. Abishal again is trying to be more expansive. So why are you saying in the positive? Say in the negative, because you're coming to expand on his negative statement. Seller rather says the Gemara, Aseifakai. Okay, so must be is going on the second half of the Tanakama statement, where the Tanakama is talking about what's permitted. Tanakama said, you could wait for nightfall just to watch your produce. Because your produce you're allowed to watch on Shabbos. So you're allowed to wait for nightfall, let's say, but it's out of the tchum, so you're allowed to wait for nightfall by the tchum. Or maybe pairs, but then again, once you were doing it for a permitted thing, you're allowed to even bring your pairs, because that wasn't your primary thing. On that, Abishal is coming along to give a klal and to say, so don't limit it for just this one thing that you told about. Give a klal regarding it so you could be more expansive about it. But that says the Gemara, but then still we don't understand his statement. His statement should be inverse. His words should have been, whatever I'm allowed to wait for nightfall, Rishani B'Mirasi Mibayle, then I'm allowed to go ahead and speak about on Shabbos, as Rashi explains, the heter of waiting for nightfall, that the Tanna Kama already said that idea. No one ever said anything in the Mishnah about what you're allowed to talk about on Shabbos. So like the phrase the Gemara uses many times, how could you go ahead and say what is said is contingent on something that wasn't even said? You should say it the other way around. Say, whenever I'm allowed to wait for nightfall, which you already mentioned something you're allowed to wait for nightfall. You said that if you're just going to listen to my prayers, if you're allowed to wait for nightfall by the boundary, you're allowed to wait by the tchum, so then say that I'm also allowed to talk about it. I'm allowed to tell somebody, hey, go ahead and watch my produce. So it should be the inverse. So we don't understand it on the ratio, because then it should be in the negative, not in the positive that he's saying it. We don't understand the sefer either, because then the statement should be inversely related. So it says the Gemara, Lo'il ma sefer. The truth is, Rabbi Shlomo is going on the sefer, like you said. And then the difficulty, you said that who mentioned anything about talking, that's permitted, that we're saying that just like you agree that saying is permitted, those are the things you're allowed to even wait for nightfall, but no one even said you're allowed to say things like that. It says the Gemara, Rabbi Shloimo HaKoy, he's going on this teaching. The Amr Rabbi Yehuda Amr Shmuel. Yehuda Shmuel, as an Amayra, he said a teaching, a person is allowed to tell his friend, Shamali perish b'tchumach, watch for me, protect for me my produce that's in your boundary. I can't get there because it's beyond my tchum. And I'm going to watch for you the perish in my tchum. So obviously we see that you're allowed to say things like that about watching your produce somewhere else. Now, Abishal and Tanna Kama, as Rashi explains, that teaching of Shmuel was a given for them. It was a given. That's an assumption that we don't say in the Mishnah, but that we knew. And that's what come Abishal and Tanna Kama. That's what Abishal and Tanna Kama. Milo and Maidus, don't you agree that regarding this, that you say that you're allowed to go ahead and wait for nightfall? What was the case you said you're allowed to wait for nightfall? Was to wash your payers. Don't you agree that that same halacha that you said that you're allowed to say that too for someone to watch your produce? Because that's the teaching of Shmuel. Meaning everyone knew that teaching. You're right, we don't have it in the words of the Mishnah, but that's how the Gemara is explaining. That was an assumption we knew. The mutu adam lo melech, a person could tell his friend, Shamali perisha b'tchumach, watch my produce in your boundary, and I'm going to watch yours in my boundary. So obviously, and this is the explanation, that since you're allowed to say it, like Shmuel had said, that's why you're saying in the Mishnah you're allowed to wait for nightfall for that thing for watching. So therefore, why you, when you're coming to say your halacha for waiting for nightfall, you only say about watching produce? Give a klal. Ve'eman say, Kol shani zaki b'mirasi, whatever I'm allowed to talk about, like the halacha Shmuel, Rishon yelahav shekalav, I'm allowed to wait for nightfall regarding such a thing. And then if you said such a klal, what the Mishnah would be teaching us, yes, your halacha of watching the produce, and then you would learn another halacha about a dead person and about a kala, which is the next coming Mishnah, which we're about to learn, where they're also you're allowed to talk about, as the Gemara is going to explain, and therefore you're allowed to be machshikalav. And therefore, the Sefer the Mishnah, that tells us in the next Mishnah, that explains Rashi is going like Abishal. Tanna Kama would disagree, and he says actually you would not be able to. As Tracy explains, the Tanna Kama holds that for things that may be done on Shabbos, that you're allowed to go to Tchum to do after Shabbos. Abishal is actually saying that you go to Tchum to do, even for things to do after Shabbos, that even though they may not be done on Shabbos, like these things that we're about to say in the next Mishnah of Iskei Kala, you're allowed to talk about it, you're allowed to wait for the Tchum, but you actually cannot do it on Shabbos itself. That would be the disagreement between Abishal and the Tanna Kama. But essentially Abishal is telling him that I disagree with you, because just like you're saying that regarding this halacha of lishmar, since you're allowed to talk about it, you're allowed to be machshach al tchum, so then therefore say it by everything, anything you're allowed to talk about, which the Gemara is going to explain exactly in a moment what that is, then you're allowed to be machshach al tchum, and therefore it's not just regarding your case of lishmar, because the principle is whatever you're allowed to talk about, those things you're allowed to be machshach al tchum. As the Gemara explains, klal asuyimai, what's this, when you say a klal, what's that coming to include? Says the Gemara, it's coming to include this that we learned in the Brisa. So my first will explain why you bring a Brisa. That's actually the next Mishnah, but it's more explicit. The Brisa says, now to go ahead and wait by the boundary for nightfall to bring an animal. I mean, it's beyond your tchum. You can't go on Shabbos, but you're waiting, the first opportunity, you're waiting by the tchum. You're not allowed to do that. Now, let's say if we were standing out of the tchum, you could call it and there could come a related halacha. Now, Abishal says the following rule. The same statement he says in the Mishnah. We just explained and we show that what he's coming to include. Whatever I'm allowed to say, Rishani lahashkel, I'm allowed to wait for nightfall by the boundary. O machshichin lefakeach liskikala v'liskames, and you can wait to take care of things for a bride and for a dead person. Lahaviloi arin v'tachrichin, to go ahead and bring for him the coffin and the burial shrouds. Where this is that halacha that Rabbi Shlomo is coming to include in his klal, because since you're allowed to talk about it, as the Mishnah is going to tell us that you can, and these words right here are going to tell us that you're allowed to tell someone to go ahead and do it for you after Shabbos. So that is exactly the klal of Rabbi Shlomo. That's why you're actually allowed to be machshin al tchum, because it's contingent one on the other. That's what Rabbi Shlomo was telling the Tanakama. When you're saying that you're allowed to be machshach lishmai peiros, isn't it because you're allowed to say it? If you're allowed to say it, then you're allowed to do it. If you're allowed to do that, then the same thing would apply for even something you can't do on Shabbos. But you're allowed to talk about it, where we say chavetzecha asun b'chavtze shemayim are mutar, and you're allowed to talk about the things for a kala and for a mess. So even if you can't do it on Shabbos, but you would be able to machshin it on tchum, that's what his comment include, because as the brisa continues, you're allowed to tell people, lech l'mal complain, you go to that place and go get stuff, get an aron, get tachrichin for the person after Shabbos. Now, if the we don't find at that place, this is just parenthetical. Once we bring in the brisa, havim mal complain is to go ahead and bring it from that other place. Now, if you can't buy it for 100, havim mal buy it for 200. Which Rabbi Yehuda, he disagrees on that last point. He says so you can't mention numbers of money of 100 or 200. That's where he disagrees regarding what you're allowed to tell someone when you're telling him on Shabbos to go ahead and do for a dead person or for a kala. But again, one thing that we see is that Abba Shol is coming to include on the seifa of the Mishnah that it's the tzarchi mitzvah, which tzarchi mitzvah you're allowed to talk about on Shabbos, then you're allowed to be machshin or tchum. That's the machlekes we have between the Tanakama and Abba Shol, what Abba Shol is coming to include in the seifa of the Mishnah, where the Tanakama had said, again, you could only go to the tchum to do after Shabbos for things that may be done on Shabbos, like lishma peiros. Like you're allowed to have it and watch your peiros on Shabbos. You can watch your peiros on Shabbos. So that's where he's in the Mishnah machshichin al tchum lishma peiros. Abba Shol says you go to the tchum to do after Shabbos for things that you may ask to be done after Shabbos, even though they may not be done on Shabbos. You can't go ahead and do certain things like cutting the burial shrouds on Shabbos. You can't do that, but you could tell someone to do it. So then, if you could tell, so that's what he said. That's the klal of Abba Shol. Like you said that you could talk about lishma peiros, so then you're allowed to be machshach. So it's anything like that. Even something that you can't do on Shabbos, like for tzarchei mitzvah, where you can't do it, but you could talk about it. So if you could talk about it, that's what Rishon will have shalom there for. Then I can wait for it after Shabbos.
What's the issue of bringing a behem?
Well,
what's the issue of a behem?
Oh, so the first will talk about that. They say it's type of animal that you would have to carry, and that you wouldn't be able to go ahead and So they discussed that. Yeah, that judge just didn't elaborate on that because it wasn't the main part of the sugya. It was just part of that brisa. But yeah, they talk about why that's forbidden on Shabbos. So we continue with the next Mishnah. The Mishnah says, continue on this theme regarding machshichin, which we speak on the previous Mishnah. We were waiting for. What? If it's mechama. If it's carrying something, it's mechama. So we continue with the next Mishnah, which continues on this theme regarding waiting for nightfall. Here we talk about regarding a heter that we just mentioned just before. Who's the Tana? We said it's Abba Shol, according to what the Gemara just said. Machshichin al tchum. You can wait for nightfall by the boundary. L'fakeach al iskekalas. Although we said generally you can't wait by the boundary for things you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, but again we just finished explaining in the Gemara that Abba Shol is the Tana over here, that he says since you're allowed to talk about, we said chavetzecha asum l'chavetze shalayim, you're allowed to talk about things, even business dealings, if it's for a married or for a bride or for a dead person. So you're allowed to talk about it. So he said, therefore, those are the things you're allowed to wait for nightfall by the boundary, which l'vakech l'eskikal, to take care of things for a bride, or l'skemes, or to get things for a dead person, l'havi loy aron v'tachrichem, to bring for him a coffin and for burial shrouds. Now, once we're talking about a mess, so we're talking about other halachas regarding a mess on Shabbos. It says the Mishnah, nachli she'edi chalilim b'Shabbos. If a non-Jew brings flutes on Shabbos for the Jews, meaning they used to use it by the Levaya, so on that halach is lo yisped ben Yisrael. So the Jews now allowed to go ahead and eulogize with those flutes forever. And the reason for that is, the way Rashi explains, at least Rashi's opinion, it's a penalty, because since it's obvious that it was brought for him, because they don't usually bring flutes, they would only use it in these dirges for the dead people, and therefore, since it's obvious it's brought for a Jew, you're not allowed to use it ever again. Elam came b'om ha'makom kar, unless it came from a closed place, which was within the tchum of the Shabbos residence, where there was no malacha being done. which Taisus explains. He says, wait a second, who cares if it was from a closed place, but it's still being brought through Rishus Rabim? And that Taisus says, since from a closed place, it's not really benefiting that much from the malacha, therefore that wouldn't be the problem about having hana, and then you're allowed to use that chalil, that flute that was brought by the non-Jew on Shabbos. Now, let's say Asur L'Aram. Let's say the non-Jews made for the Jew that died, made a coffin, they dug for him a grave where that wasn't done for the Jew, but that was done for a non-Jew or to sell. Then you cover by Yisrael. Then even though it was done on Shabbos, a Jew could be buried in it. But the Mishvil Yisrael, let's say they made a coffin specifically for that Jew, let you cover by Lamed, then forever the Jew's not going to be buried over there again because that's obvious as being done for the Jew, and that would be forbidden to have benefit. Now says the Gemara, Maimi Makom Karv, we said regarding the middle halacha, regarding the flutes being brought on Shabbos, we said you can't use it because it's done for a Jew, unless it's brought from a closed place. So what does that mean from a closed place? So we have a machlekes. Rav Ami says Makom Karv Mamish has to be literally a closed place. In other words, we have to have verified to know that it was brought from within the Tchum, that we saw he brought it from his house. But it can't be a situation of doubt. Shmuel Ami says, no, we suspect, and it's interesting, Rashi says that we find such terminology of suspecting, not as a stringency, but as a leniency. If a girl became pregnant, we're concerned that it wasn't through an inappropriate relationship, that she went into a bath and she became pregnant from semen, and therefore she's permitted for a kohen. But one thing is, Shmuel is telling us that even if the person came from out of the city, we're toiling, we actually make it dependent to say that it is permitted to utilize. And we say that maybe he was within the Tchum on Erev Shabbos, and therefore you could eulogize with those flutes right after Matzah Shabbos. And according to Shmuel, what the Mishnah is saying, that when it says the Jew's not allowed to eulogize with it, it's only if you could be toiler to say that maybe he came from a closed place. In other words, coming to include, if you know for sure he came from far away, then you can't use it. But Makom Karev is, even if it could be, as long as it could be, the Safik Rabban of Emila Akabi says, as long as you could say that maybe he came from within the Tchum, then it's going to be mutter. Says Gemara, Dega Mastim Kafasei Shmona. The Gersois here, we'll mention in a second in Rashi, there's different Gersois here how to read the Gemara. But it says the Gemara, Dega Mastim Kafasei Shmona. There's a precise reading of our Mishnah that sounds like Shmuel. Because the Mishnah had said, Asalei Aaron, if they made for him a coffin, V'chavalei Kaver, or they dug for him a grave, he covered by Yisrael, they could bury the Jew there. Meaning, we suspend out of doubt that maybe it was done for a non-Jew. Even though it says that they made it for him, but we don't know for sure they made it for him. Maybe they made it to sell or whatever. So we see Misveika Shari, when it's a situation of that, we don't know, did he make it for the Jew, did they not make it? It's going to be permitted. So here also, by the flutes that are brought, when we don't know if it was in the Tchum or out of the Tchum, Misveika Shari, it would sound like from the Mishnah, that when it's a situation of doubt, it's going to be permitted. Like Shmuel said, we don't have to know for sure that it was done the permitted way, as long as it's possible. But it says the Gemara, V'tanya Kama say the Rav. The Brisa says like Rav, and as one sees, you already have over here the Hagoyis Agra saying actually it's supposed to say V'tanya Kama say the Shmuel. But we'll first explain the way it says the way in our Gemaras, which Rashi initially has it, and then the way the Vilna Gaon says with Rashi also ends up changing. The Gemara says the Brisa sounds like Rav, that actually when it's a situation of doubt, is going to be Asr. Why? Halacha says like this: regarding a city, we have Jews and non-Jews dwelling in that city. There was a bathhouse that was used and heated up on Shabbos. So it depends. If the majority of the inhabitants are non-Jewish, so right after Shabbos you could use it right away, because we presume it was done after the majority of the people, which are non-Jews, and that wasn't the malacha that was done for a Jew. But in Rabbi Yisrael, let's say the majority of the inhabitants are Jewish. So Yamtin Ad Kadesh Yicham, you have to wait until the water gets heated, because that malacha that was done on Shabbos was done for the majority of the inhabitants, which are Jews, and therefore it's going to be forbidden. You're going to have to wait till after Shabbos. Let's say Mechza Mechza, let's say there's 50-50, half Jews, half non-Jews. So then Asr is forbidden. V'yamtin, you have to wait Ad Kadesh Yicham Uchaman, until the amount of time that it takes to heat up the water. Now, if you're going to say, wait a second, so you tell me, but after the amount of time, as the Rashi explains, that it gets heated up, it's going to be permitted. But here in our Mishnah, we said the flutes you're not allowed to use ever. So, at least the way Rashi understands it. So what's the difference? So on that, Rashi explains, because by the flute it was obvious, because they only bring it for a dead person. There's only one dead person in town. Obviously, it's being brought for the Jew. But the bathhouse is not so obvious, because there are non-Jews. It's just that we're stringent and we go after the majority or after the 50%, and therefore we say you can't use it, and therefore it's not going to be an Isser Lamas. It's just going to be what's called B'chtei Shias. You have to wait for the amount of time that the malacha was done. That's the Tanakh. Now, but that one thing we see from there is that that's like Rav. again, according to this version of the Gemara that we said, Tani Kavasei the Rab, that's like Rab because we see a situation of doubt that's going to be Asr. Because we say, when it's 50-50, you have to wait B'chdei She'asr. That's like Rab who says, until we know for sure, the Malacha of the non-Jew is going to be forbidden. Rabbi Yehuda, he says, a related halacha, he says, Bamvati Ketana, a small bath, which there you could say that it was done right after Shabbos, through the servants, and by many kettles. So then, in Yeshba Roshas, if there's a distinguished personality in the town, then Reichitz B'miyad, then the Jew could wash it right away. Why? Because then you could say that it actually, although it's right, you went right after Shabbos, it actually was heated up right after Shabbos for that non-Jew. That's a possibility because he's a wealthy guy, and he comes, and it could have been done right then. So therefore, we don't even suspect, as the Gemara explains, my Roshas. He says in Yeshba Adam Chashav, there's a distinguished personality in that town. Shesh La'asar Avadim, he has 10 slaves. Shemachan La'yud Kumkum in the Basachas, they heat up for him 10 kettles at one time. So that's what we're saying, Bamvati Gitana in the small bathhouse, you could wash it right after Shabbos, because Kubi was heated up right after Shabbos, because this wealthy guy, he goes, okay, boys, let's go. Get this place running right now, and it could heat up right away. So it could be what the Malacha was not even done in the first place on Shabbos. Now, just Rashi points out a different girsa that says actually Tani Kavasei, not like Rav, like we said from the Gemara, but Tani Kavasei the Shmuel, and not to be goris the Daikim as Nitin until it says Misveka Shari. And actually, the support that's being for Shmuel is from Rabbi Yehuda. We see from Rabbi Yehuda's teaching by the Vati Ketana, by the small bath, that we're toila lahakal. What do you mean? You come right after Shabbos, 20 minutes after Shabbos, you made Abdullah, you come running over, coming to the Schwitz, you come here, it's nice and hot. What? I don't know, was it done on Shabbos, or was it done right after Shabbos? So you see from Yehuda, that I could be toila lahakal, I could say, maybe it was done right now. What do you mean? It doesn't take, it usually takes a few hours. No, wealthy guy in town, maybe he was here, maybe he did it. So you see that we tell you lahakal. That's like Rav. So the Bryce actually supporting Rav, not Shmuel. What's with the Reisha? Didn't we say in our gear so that Tani Kavasei the Shmuel from the Tanakama that you see by 50-50 that when it's a suffix that we're actually going to say it's Asr? Isn't that like Shmuel, like the Gemara, like our version of the Gemara is saying like Shmuel, not like Rav? So Rashi explains that no. According to the version that we're saying that the Bryce supports Rav, even the Tanakama is not difficult because when there's 50-50, it's not that we don't know was it done for the Jew. It's a very interesting logic. Not that we don't know was it for the Jew, for the Gentiles. When the 50-50, it was being done for both, for the Jews and for the non-Jews. Because you don't do it just for one person to say, oh, we don't know who it was. And therefore, that's what's going to be us, even according to Rav, because it's not a suffix. When we say it's us when it's 50-50, it's because it's being done for both. So since the Malacha is being done for the Jews also, so therefore then you would have to wait. And therefore that's not difficult in Rav. And actually the Gersa would be Tani Kavasei the Rav, and not Tani Kavasei the Rav, and Tani Kavasei the Shmuel, and not like Rav, because the teaching is from the Sefer, which you see that you are toila hakal, and even the ratio is not difficult because there it's not a problem about being machmer, because it's not a suffix, it's that it's being done for both. We continue with the halacha of the Mishnah that we said asalei aron. We said that if you could make, if let's say they made a coffin, or they dug a grave, so we said then you could bury the Jew in it, and we said but if it's being done for the Jew, then it's going to be forbidden. But the Gemara wonders amai, and the question is specifically like on Rav. Hachanami here also, Yam T'mechdei Shiyasu. You should wait the amount of time that it takes to go ahead. And in other words, even though here it's not obvious, like we said, to be forbidden forever, but maybe it was done for the Jew. So like just like by the bathhouse where you say when it's a suffix, then you're going to have to wait. So why is this any different? Why when the grave was made, it sounds like you could use it right after Shabbos. Why do you have to wait the amount of time it takes to make the coffin, to make the grave? So Ma'uli explains because it's talking about Ba'amid, where the grave is Besarati on the highway. No well-respected Jew is going to be buried on a highway. So for sure it was not being done for a Jew. Certain things you could tell, it wasn't built for the Jews, you could tell. It's definitely made by a non-Jewish developer or whatever. So here also, that obviously was not being done for a Jew because the grave is by the highway. You have those, crosses and you have this buried over here. No Jews being buried there on the side of the highway. So therefore, that's how you know it wasn't done. Because you're right, if it was a suffix, we would say you would have to wait b'chdei shi'asa. So although you don't have to wait a lamas because it wasn't definitively done for a Jew, but you don't have to wait b'chdei shi'asa. Okay, says the Matenach Kevin, that works for a grave. But Aron Michael, what are you going to say for the coffin? How will you know for sure that it wasn't done for a Jew? That you don't have to wait b'chdei shi'asa. He says because B'muta we're talking about where the coffin was placed al kivrei on the grave of a non-Jew on the highway. where it's obvious that that coffin was being made for that grave, and again, therefore, then you could go ahead and buy that from the non-Jew, because you know for sure that it wasn't being done for the Jew. But you're right, if it was a suffix, you would have to wait b'chdei shiyas. Continuing the halacha, the next Mishnah, which continues on this theme regarding a dead person. It says the Mishnah, Oisin kol tzarech hames, you could take care of all the needs of a dead person. Sachin, you could smear, or madichin, I say, and you could wash him with water. As long as you don't move one of the limbs of the dead person, you don't lift up the hand, or the foot, or the eyelid, you can't go ahead and do that. It's considered muktzah. And shemtin is like hamitachta, you could remove the pillow from beneath the dead person. You could put him on the sand, and why would you do that? The shul, so that as you continue to the base, so that shiyamtin, so that it should delay, that it shouldn't decompose because of the heat of the sheets and of the pillows. So you could go ahead and remove those pillows. You could go ahead and tie the jaw of the dead person, because the way the dead person is that the mouth keeps on opening. So you could tie the jaw so that it doesn't open up more than what it is already, as the Mishnah itself explains. It's not that you want to lift it back up. You can't tie the jaw to close it from what was open, because then you're really moving the limb. It's just that it shouldn't increase to open, that you're allowed to do. Similar type of halacha, interesting comparison, is that so to a beam that broke on Shabbos. So you could support the beam with a bench, because that's not muktzah, it has the halacha of a kli, or with the post of a bed. But again, here also, it's not that to go ahead and lift up the beam that broke, because that would be blind, that would be building. Rather, it's just that it should not increase to continue to break, that you're allowed to go and support it with the bed and with the bench. Now, the Gemara says a question regarding this, that we said you're allowed to smear and wash the dead person. It says the Gemara like this. But the Gemara is going to have an understanding of the logic of the halacha of lasach ladich, and then it's going to come with a new interpretation. From Rabbi Yehuda Mishmul, he says, there's a story with the student of Meir. So we left him into the bathhouse. Because ladich karka, his Rebbe was there in the bathhouse. He wanted to go ahead and wash the floor for his Rebbe. Amalei said, no, we don't wash the floor of the bathhouse on Shabbos. So lasach karka, he wanted to smear some oil on it. Amalei ain't something. He says, no, we don't smear it. So if Rashi explains, the Gemara's question is, you see that something that you're not allowed to move, which is the stone of the ground, you're not allowed to smear. So therefore the dead person too, you're not allowed to move the dead person, so why are you allowed to be sachin? Why are you allowed to smear? So that the Gemara explains, as Rashi adds to the words, that's not because of moving the stone floors of the bathhouse that you're not allowed to smear it or wash it. That's because of a different concern of a shvuya gumish. You might come, if we let you wash, you might come to smooth out the pits. Now, and the words that are missing here in the Gemara, like Rashi explains, and even though the bathhouse was a floor of stone, and there's no concern for smoothing out the ground, because it's not a ground, earthen floor, but still karka machalfa. One ground with another ground is confusing, and if we let you do it on the stone floor, you might come to do it on an earthenwood floor. So therefore, you're not allowed to wash. But that is not mixed with karka, but a dead person regarding the ground. Like Michlev is not going to get confused, and therefore you're allowed to be sachin and madiach is a mess. No problem with smearing a dead person. It doesn't mean anything that you can't move. You're not allowed to anoint. It's that by the ground of the mikvah of the bath is a different reason. Not because you can't move that stone. That's because you might come to confusion with the ground. The dead person doesn't have that. Therefore, you're allowed to go ahead and, as the Mishnah said, lasach as a mace. Now, when the Mishnah said kol, it said kol tzarech hames, all the needs of a dead person you're allowed to do. Says the Gemara yomai. What's it coming to include that was not said explicitly in the Mishnah? Because the Mishnah already said many things you're allowed to do for a dead person. Says the Gemara it's coming to include this within the brayso. Mevin kli maker, you're allowed to bring vessels that bring coldness, like glass. Glass is generally cool. You're allowed to bring a cooling vessel, the klimatzchus, or metal vessels, which are also cool. Umanichin al kreis, and put it on the stomach of the dead person. Why would you do that? Kadesh like tafuch, that it shouldn't burst. Well, peikin is nakal. You also allowed to close up the orifices, the holes of the dead person. Kadesh like tikkun ben ruach, that the ear doesn't go into the dead person to prevent it from really decomposing and blowing up. And the Ak Shleimam b'chachmas is so too Shlomo says in his wisdom in Kahelas that the stomach of the dead person it inflates and it bursts, and therefore that's what you would be able to do on Shabbos to prevent from happening. As it says, when the person dies, the pasuk says Achale Yerasik Chevel HaKesef, until the silver rope doesn't snap. What does that mean? This regarding a dying person. Zechut HaShedra. This is the spinal cord, which is like a rope, and it's white like silver, so it's called the silver rope. And Vesoritz Gulas Hazav, and the golden bowl is shattered. What is that? Ze'ama. This is the male member, which is like a type of a spring of children. So it's like Gulas Mayim, like a a pool of water, so we're calling it the golden bowl, is a male member. And that the pitcher is broken on the fountain. This is the part of the pasuk we want to bring from Kalas to say Zehakeres, that's the stomach. So that's like the pitcher breaks on the fountain. As the pasuk continues, and we're saying that's the meaning, what's the pitcher that's breaking? That's the stomach. As we see it burst, and therefore on Shabbos we're saying that's what's being included from the Mishnah. The kol tzarech hames you're allowed to put on like a cold thing like glass so it doesn't burst. And the pasuk continues, v'noretz hagalgal el habur, that the wheel smashes to the pit. This is all a mushal. What does this mean? They perish. This is the waste matter, as Rashi explains, because galgal could be galal. Galal is waste matter. So the waste matter is going el habur to the pit, meaning from his stomach, which burst, as we just said in the previous words of the pasuk, it falls back into his mouth, which is the pit. The pasuk says in Malachi, I'm going to scatter the excrement on your face. Perish chagichem, the waste matter of your holidays, which we see that the stomach is going to burst and it flies onto the mouth on the dead person, and therefore that's what we're saying. We want to put the glass on it to cool it off from the dead person, that it doesn't burst on Shabbos. You love to do kol tzarech hames. Now another interpretation the Gemara brings on these last words, some say Amar of Chaga, says Elu b'nei Adam, these are people shemanichem divrei Torah, they forsake the words of Torah. So the word perish is actually from the word of perish. They go away from the words of Torah. That's v'derisi perish. V'oisin kol yimim kechagim. That's perish chagechem. They make every day like a holiday. They're like just delight themselves. They're just enjoying themselves. And those are the people that the pasuk is told. Hashem is, I'm going to scatter those people that are perish from the words of Torah. And they perish because every day is like a chag. Now the Gemara just concludes Amar of Levi, Amar of Papi, and Rabbi Shua, regarding what the first interpretation that we said, which was our sugi talking about. After 3 days that a person had died, his stomach bursts, and it falls on his face. And it's almost like the stomach is telling the person, take what you put inside of me. Meaning the waste matter from the stomach burst open, and it flies on his face, and it's telling the face, you brought this, the mouth, you brought this into me, here, take what you took, al panechem, this is on your face. And therefore, again, that was the halacha that we said regarding putting in a coal of tzarech hames. The next Mishnah, which continues on this theme regarding the tzarech hames on Shabbos, says the Mishnah, Ema atzmin es hames. You're not allowed to close the eyes of a dead person on Shabbos, even after he has passed away, because again, the dead person is muktzah, so you're not allowed to move even a limb from the dead person. And moreover, says the Mishnah, and in a weekday, you're not allowed to do that if he's in the middle of dying. And if someone closed the eye of a dead person when he's passing away, he's considered a murderer, as the Gemara is going to explain in the Brisa, because in a small little movement, you already made the person come closer to death. And many people actually don't know this. That this is something that happens when people are dying, and they what? Right. So even just closing his eyes or whatever, he could actually be a murderer, causing the person to die a little bit quicker. As the Gemara brings time in the Brisa, if someone closes the eyes of a person as he's dying, he's a murderer, because he made him die earlier than he was supposed to. Mashal and there should cover lechas can be compared to a candle that's in the middle of extinguishing. Other maniach etz boy lev, a person just puts his finger on top, miyad kavs, it's going to automatically go out. And that's the same thing over here with just closing the eyelids. Now Tanya Lina Bryce of Shimon Lim says, if someone wants to, because it actually is a very scary thing. When you see the person dying, you see those eyes gazing out it's something that's very frightening. So someone wants to have the eyes closed, but he's not allowed to close them because it would be causing, it's like a murderer. So there's a homeopathic, so to speak, natural way to have him close his eyes without you actually closing his eyes. What you do is so you pour wine you blow wine into his nostril, and you put oil between his eyelids, and you hold on to the two big toes of his feet, and it closes by itself. So you're not allowed to close his eyes, but these things. So these things, the Gemara tells us that would be a natural way of him closing his eyes. Now, Tanya learned in Brisa, once we're mentioning this idea regarding what you could do on Shabbos for a person or not.
He's dead or he's not?
No,
he's not.
He's dead. No, this is his dead.
What?
The sheet of putting the yarn when it's dead already.
And why? And this is on Shabbos.
So what's the difference? So if he's dead already, why can't you close his eyes in a regular way?
No, Shabbos you're not allowed to close his eyes.
Shabbos is muktzah.
Yeah, so if this would be Shabbos.
No, but here the price was Ton Rabbanan.
Unless you're saying even on the weekday because you didn't close the eyes yourself. You just caused it to close the eyes.
Even the weekday, you're not allowed to do anything.
I'm saying this is the Ton Rabbanan is weekdays or Shabbos?
It's why wouldn't it be both? I'm just asking, why wouldn't it be both?
Is he dead already or is he not?
Let's say he's not. But you didn't cause him.
The
You
voice is
didn't
then-
close the eyes.
Why should
But if
not?
it's not, you're not
The voice is
allowed to.
then you don't close his eyes.
But you didn't close his eyes. I'm saying you didn't close his eyes. You caused him to close his
But
eyes.
if you go
So
to
it's causing them to die earlier.
But you didn't do it.
So who did
causing it, first
I don't know. I don't know if they were
touching
causing him
it.
to die earlier.
Not
I don't know.
touching guys as well.
I don't know.
You're
What?
not supposed to touch a guy's as well.
To even touch him. So if that's the case, then I guess it's probably too much Shabbos.
And the second price is talking about
Which second verse?
the Tanya, Hashem Begamilah.
Right. That's the same. That's the that's what we're talking about. That's the verse we're talking about. That price.
It's got
No,
to
I'm
be
talking
that
about the first price. The Ton Rabbanan Masim and the Six and that.
No, that's on the weekday. That's on the weekday.
That's if he's a ghost.
Yeah, that's on the weekday.
And the
second
second
one
price
is
is
dead.
when? When he's dead?
Sure.
The voice is just asking.
No, if he's dead
So
on
then
Shabbos,
why can't you
meaning on
close his
Shabbos, then on Shabbos.
If he's dead, he's not closing his eyes by himself.
What?
No matter what you do, he's not closing his eyes by
So
himself.
they're saying the penny saying he can't be in Shabbos. He's not. How's he
Even
going to
if
close
he's
his
dead,
eyes?
then he's not doing
He's
anything.
dead.
He's dead.
So it must be that it's taka on the weekday. So I assume that it's talking about during the weekday, and you're not closing his eyes. You want him to close his eyes.
But it says the voice is just asking Adam Shem Mess.
Probably. You
Oh,
want it
Shemais.
to stay closed. You want it to stay closed.
He's
If you
dead
close
already.
it, it pops open again. So he's giving you a trick that you can
Close
close
it,
it
yeah.
and then stay closed.
Right.
I gotta try this and see if it works.
Right. Says it's still nice.
Next time.
Yeah, I hear. Oh, says the Gemara, but the Gemara now is going to make a contrast regarding a living person and the dead person, regarding the Chilul Shabbos that we were speaking about in our previous Mishnah. It's time to learn the Brisa. He says, "Tinik ben Yom Echai." If you have a child that's even a 1 day old child that's living, so Machal Lamas Shabbos, you could desecrate the Shabbos. David Melchizedek Meis, but you have David, the king of the Jewish people, that he's dead. Ein Machal Lamas Shabbos, and now desecrate the Shabbos. As the Gemara explains, Tinik ben Yom Echai. If you have a child that's a day old that's alive, Machal Lamas Shabbos, you're allowed to desecrate the Shabbos. So why is this? So Amr Torah, because the Torah says, Chila Shabbos Echad, yeah, desecrate one Shabbos for him. That he goes and he's going to have to keep many Shabbos. It's a good investment. But David, so amazed. David, the king of the Jewish people, was dead. The him, you're not Machal Shabbos. Why? Once a person is dead, but mitzvahs, he already can't. He doesn't keep the mitzvahs. Find Rabbi Yochanan says in Tehillim, the meisim chavshi, but the dead is freedom. What does that mean? Once a person dies, Nasei chavshi the mitzvah becomes free from the mitzvahs, and there's no reason for us to be Machal Shabbos. So you could be the greatest person that would ever live, but you're dead, so we don't have that heter of Lishma Shabbos Harbor. But a 1 day old child, we already have that heter, and therefore allowed to be Machal Shabbos. Continue on this theme, the time we learned in the Brisa, Shimon Elazar, he says, Tinik ben Yom Echai, a similar contrast. A 1 day old baby, ain't tzarich l'shom, you don't have to protect him min achulda, min achbarim, from a weasel, from mice, because when you have a live creature, the animals generally don't attack. But if you have the king of Bashan, who was this giant, every animal would probably run from him, and he's dead. You have to protect him from the weasel and from the mouse. You know, like it says the pasuk in Bereshit. Pasuk says, your fear and your dread will be, as the pasuk continues, on all the wild animals of the land and on all the birds of the heaven, whatever crawls on the ground, or whatever fish in the sea is in your hands. But that tells us, as long as the person is alive, a Muslim would tell us his fear is placed on the creatures. Once he's dead, so then his fear is not there anymore, and then all the animals come and eat up that person. Now, similarly, the Gemara brings, Zamar Papa says, we have a tradition that Arya, a lion, a Beitroy Leinafel, will not attack two people to kill them. Because it says in the Pasuk, your fear, in the plural, two, and that's Al Kol Chayei Haaretz, on all wild animals of the land, even the lion. It says we see that it's not true. We see that lions do attack two people. It says the Gemara, which, because if a person has he has blood on his head, where there's already a penalty from Shemaim that he's going to die, so he appears to the person like a behemoth. The Amar says, a wild animal does not rule over a person. Until he appears to the wild animal like a regular animal. It says the pasuk in Tehillim, Adam, a man, be karbal yalin. In honor, he will not go lay down. Nimshal, he's ruled. In other words, if a wild animal is ruling over that person, then you know, because he appears to the wild animal like a behemoth. But if a person is a righteous person, then a lion is not going to go ahead and attack when there's at least for sure 2 people. Similarly, the Gemara brings regarding the power of 2 people together, that then there's the fear of the people have over the creatures of the world. So even regarding demons, says the Gemara, Amar B'chanina says, Asul lichon devayis yechid, it's forbidden to sleep alone in a house. Whoever sleeps alone in a house, so then Lilis, which is the mother of all the demons, has dominion over him. Because again, 2 people together, like we said, has a certain moira that the creatures of the world cannot harm them. The time we learned the Brisa regarding what we mentioned before, regarding the Mesim Chafshi, that once a person dies, then he's dead and he doesn't do any mitzvahs anymore. He says the following teaching. He say, Asay, do charity, when you find someone to do charity with, and you have the resources to do charity, which you have money, and you still have the ability to do it before you die. Rabbi Shloimy says in his wisdom in Kalas, remember your Creator in your days of youth, until it doesn't come the bad days. What's the bad days? This is the days of when a person is old, when he can't do the things he used to be able to do. And the pasuk continues, and there's going to come years when you're going to say, I have no desire in this. What does it mean that there's no desire? These are the days of the Mashiach. Why? What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? Although we're praying and waiting, anticipating, but there's not days of merit because there's nothing to merit anymore because everyone's wealthy already. And there's no times of liability to be stubborn and not to go ahead and give because there's no one's going to ask you for money. And therefore now you have an opportunity to do it now because when Mashiach comes, you're not going to have an opportunity. When you get old, you're not going to do certain things too. Which the Gemara says a pliga to Shmuel, but this teaching actually disagrees with Shmuel because we're saying that the Yomei Mashiach, there's no more Bechir, there's no more, everything changes. But Dam Shmuel says actually no, there's no difference between this world and when Mashiach is going to come. The only difference is going to be the dominion of the kings over the Jewish people, that we're going to have our own country. Like it says the pasuk in Devarim, it actually will not stop being paupers from amongst the midst of the land. The people will be poor in the Mesa Mashiach. The first teaching was saying there's not going to be, and therefore do it now, because when Mashiach comes, you're not going to have the opportunity to do it anymore. Time to learn the Brisa, continue on this thing regarding doing tzedakah when you have money to give. Again, classic Talmudic style, where we go from one thing and we mention something, we go in a related teaching. Shabbalazar Kappa Amy says, a person should always beseech mercy regarding this attribute, meaning that he should not become poor, because becoming poor is something that's ready to come to him, to his children, to his grandchildren. So a person should always beseech mercy regarding poverty, because if he doesn't become poor, but Benai, his son becomes poor. If his son doesn't become poor, then his grandson becomes poor. Shemach says the pasuk in Devarim. Pasuk says, it opens up over there, nasin titalei. You should surely give to the poor person. You should not have a bad heart when you're giving him. Why? Because of this thing, the pasuk continues, Hashem has blessed you and given you everything you have. Now, but the word biglal, Tana de Bishmol, biglal can be read galgal hu shachayz ba'olam. It's a circle that there is in the world, that poverty is something that God goes around, comes around regarding having money and not having money. So, because it's a circle, that's why you should give people. As the Gemara brings, Amr B'Yisrael, first he says, in Aktin, we have a tradition, Haitzum Rabbanan, Talmudic scholar, Lo Mi'ani. Doesn't become poor. Says the Gemara, Talmudic scholar doesn't become poor. But Chazina de Mi'ani, we see many Talmudic Chacham that are poor. Says the Gemara, no, what we mean to say is, in Isa Mi'ani, if he becomes poor, Aduri Apiskal Lemahadr. He has that dignity that he doesn't go banging on door to door. That he's not going to do. But the Gemara brings a story regarding this idea that we said it's a galgal ha'chayzer, that it's a revolving wheel, this of having money and not having money. Amalai Reb Chila the base. Chia said to his wife, when a poor person comes, give him a piece of bread, so that when your sons have to go get a piece of bread, they'll give it to him. So the wife said to the husband, what are you're cursing our children? You're saying that they're going to need it? So he said, there's a pasuk, because of this thing, which as we just mentioned before, the B'tanya Rabbi Shmuel, he says, it's a wheel that there is in the world, that even though we have money now, but our kids most very likely won't have, and therefore give to the poor so that they give to your children. Similarly, Tanya learned the Brisa of Rabbi Shloimy, he says the pasuk in the Devarim, it says, "V'nasan lo rachamim," he will give you mercy, v'rechamecha, and he'll have mercy on you, v'rebecha, and he'll give you. What's this 2 times rachamim rechamemcha? So that the Gemara expounds, it's talking about your rachamim. Kolam rachamim ala briyas, whoever has rachamim on people, which when it says v'nasan lo rachamim, means that you're going to have mercy on others, then Merachim Lav Mishamayim, that's a Sebechamecha, then they're going to have mercy from you from Shemayim. But whoever does not have mercy on others, they don't have mercy on him. Somebody just asked me on Shabbos, he was saying, well, I do a job and then they don't pay me. Should I should I go ahead and be moichel them, or should I go ahead and say, you'll have to take care of it upstairs? So I said, this Gemara, I wasn't coming from this Gemara, but I said that same idea. It says, you could be Oyman Aladin. But if you're Merachim on other people, then Merachim Alav Mishamayim. Here you're going to give tzedakah. Maybe certain times you don't have to, but if you have that midah, then Hashem is going to treat you with that same midah. Now, continue with that theme that we said before regarding the pasuk in Kehelis of the breakdown of the person's body. Now we talk about regarding this similar idea. It says, until there's not the dimming of the sun and of the light. What does that mean? We're talking about, again, a person deteriorating and dying. Zu padachas. This refers to a person's forehead. Why? Because a person's forehead is smooth and it's the shiniest part of a person's face. It's almost like the sun that's, when the person dies, that it dims. And of the nose, because the nose is the most prominent part, it's the shine of a person's face. So therefore that's the light that is dimming. And then the pasuk continues, and the moon, Zun Neshama, that refers to a person's soul, like the pasuk says, the famous pasuk initially, the light of God is the soul of a person. And the stars, what's this? Elu halasasa, that refers to the cheeks, which are like around the moon and the sun. Again, this is all a metaphor in the pasuk tells, which is talking about a person dying, which all these beautiful things are suddenly disappearing. That the clouds are going to come back after the rain. What does that refer to? This refers to a person, the illumination of a person's eyesight. Which the person loses his eyesight after crying so much. So the shabbat ha'avim, the clouds, means to say like the cloudiness, the darkening of the eyes, which is going to be after he has all that rain, which is the crying in his older years, which because of that weakens all the pain that he has. So that's where the clouds come back after the rain. The cloudiness of the eyes, that dims his eyesight after the rain, after all the tears that he sheds. Where Amar Shmuel says, Haidamasa, this crying, the tears, Adar ben Shnin, until a person's 40 years old, Sahadra, then the tears come back. After that age already, the tears don't come back. Similarly, the Gemara brings one of Nachman, Haikuchlam. Kuchla was some type of an eye ointment that they would use for healing. Adar ben Shnin meravach, until 40 years. So then the person, when he uses this eye ointment, it improves his eyesight. From that point on, Afila Malia, even if it fills up this applicator to put into his eyes, it's so big, like the weaver's beam, all it's going to do is going to maintain the eyesight that it doesn't get worse. But it's not going to make his eyesight any better. Which parenthetically, the Gemara asks Micah Masma, what are we teaching by saying that even if you do kavisna de gardoi like the weaver's beam, and that says the Gemara, it's coming to tell you the kama de olam, that the thicker that the makuchla, that the piece of wood that you use, which the applicator to put into the tube, to put into the eyes, the better it is. So meaning, even if you use this huge applicator to put into the eyes, it's not going to make the eyesight better. Finally, it's going to maintain what you already have. Now, the Gemara brings a story regarding this, that we're saying that crying in your older years, it makes the person weaker. There's Reb Chanina Shchibale Barate. He had a daughter that passed away. He wasn't crying on her. So Amalei the basis, the wife said to him, you just got rid of a chicken from the house? What, it's like, that's all? You don't even care? You're not even crying over the daughter that passed away? So Amalei, he said to her, like, this is classic, male, female. It's tiredness. He's coming from logic. Right? She's crying away, and she's like, why aren't you crying? He said, tiredness, I should have two problems. Tichla ve'ivra, I should go ahead and lose children and also become blind from crying? As the Gemara says, he held like Rabbi Yechanan, and then that there are sheish demois, and the 6 types of tears. Shalosh yafes, v'shalosh rois. 3 types of tears are good, 3 types of crying is bad. Shal ashen, tears that come from smoke, the shal bechir, that come from crying, from, let's say, from mourning and from difficulty, as we continue to have with Kovnan Beis and with Aleph. The shal basic kisi, or from the bathroom where a person's in, he has such abdominal pain and he has tears. So rois, those types of tears are bad. Shal sam, but from medicine, shal schek, of crying from laughter, shal peiros, or from fruit, like let's say the smell, the aroma of mustard, those things are yafis, those are good, and therefore he says, what? I lost a child. Of course it's a sad thing, but now I'm going to go ahead and cry. I'm going to also become blind from crying, and therefore he didn't go ahead and cry because why should he lose 2 things coming from that logic? Some of these we spoke about today's Daf and Shabbos Daf Kuf and Alf. a Kufn Alf, we explained the halacha of the Mishnah, Klalam Abishol. Abishol had said the following rule, that whatever I'm allowed to say, so I'm allowed to go and be machshir. And the Gemara was trying to figure out what words of the Tanakama was he going on, because the Tanakama said things that you're not allowed to wait for the boundary and things that you are allowed to. And if he was going on the Reisha, then he should say the negative. And if he was going in the Seifa, he should say whatever I'm allowed to be machshir, I'm allowed to say, because the Tanakama only spoke about being machshir. So he explained that he's going on the Seifa of the Tanakama that says that you're allowed to wait for nightfall by the boundary to be shomer. And regarding the Amira, that we knew, everyone understood that halacha of Shmuel. That you're allowed to tell your friend to wait, to go ahead and watch my parents. So if everyone understood that halacha, that was a given, that you're allowed to say that, tell someone to watch your parents. Oh, so Tanakama, that's where you're coming from when you say you're allowed to wait by the boundary for nightfall for that. So you see that it's whatever you're allowed to say is allowed to wait for the nightfall. So therefore, that's what Rabbi Shloimy comes to say a klal. And he says, then the same thing would include a dead person and a kala, which was the next Mishnah that we said, that since you're allowed to talk about tzarchei mitzvah on Shabbos, so that's where the Rabbi Shloimy comes to disagree with the Tanakama. Even that's something you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Tanakama was saying something you're allowed to say, you're allowed to do, you're allowed to wait for the nightfall. You can't do it on Shabbos. You can't go ahead and cut the burial shrouds on Shabbos. But you're allowed to go ahead and watch Paris. So I'm allowed to tell my friend to watch it. So I'm allowed to wait by the boundary for nightfall. But I'm still saying even the bigger chiddush says no. Whatever I'm allowed to say, I'm allowed to wait for nightfall, which means to say even something I can't do on Shabbos, like Taisi explained. Which I'm not going to cut the burial shroud. I'm allowed to tell someone about it on Shabbos because that's tzarchei mitzvah. Then I'm allowed to wait by the boundary for nightfall. That's why Abishol come to disagree with his klal on the Tanakama. Then we went to the next Mishnah, which the Gemara had explained that is Abishol, that you're allowed to wait for nightfall for taking care of needs for a bride, for a dead person. Then we had a related halacha. Once we talked about a dead person, we said that if the non-Jew does a malacha and he brings the flutes on Shabbos, so you're not allowed to go ahead and eulogize with them unless it came from a close place, which Rabbi Shloimy. Does that mean we have to know that it came from a close place, or no? Like the words Chashina we explained from Rashi could mean even as a lean. Say no, as long as we could be Tayla. As long as we say maybe, that's enough for the halacha. And again, we said that when the Gemara makes a diuk, we weren't sure the Gisois and Rashi is that like Rab or Shmuel. Are we saying that we b'tayim lahakal, we bring a raya from the Tanakama or from Rabbi Yehuda, that we're saying that, okay, when the situation of doubt, are we going to say stringently leniency? That's really the machlekes Rabbi Shmuel. When you have a Amir la'akum, you don't know, did he bring it from a cover or not? That is the machlekes Rabbi Shmuel. Same thing regarding the bathhouse, when you have 50-50, is that a stringency? Or did we say that no, that's because it was definitively done for both the non-Jew and for the Jew? There's two different eschais that Rashi had. Then the Mishnah said regarding if there was a coffin and a grave that was made, it's permitted. And the Gemara ultimately explained that why do you have to wait at least b'chtei sheyasa? Maybe it was done for the Jew. As we say regarding the bathhouse, that maybe, as the gear says for Rav, that it's going to be awesome. Says no, because it was the grave and the coffin was on it, was done on a highway. No Jew, no self-respecting Jew is being buried on by a highway, and it was obviously done for a non-Jew, and therefore it's going to be permitted. But unless it was made for Yisrael, then you're not allowed to use it ever because it was obviously done for a Jew, and it's a big chilul to go ahead and use it, and therefore you never use it at all. The next Mishnah said you're allowed to take care of old tzarch hames on Shabbos, as long as you don't move one of the limbs. You're allowed to remove the pillow, and it said many different halachas. We said you're allowed to tie the jaw, but not that it should become higher, because then you're moving the jaw. So to a beam that broke, you're allowed to hold it in place, but not to make it higher. With this, the Gemara explained that we said that you're allowed to anoint a dead person. It's not the same thing, you're not allowed to anoint the floor of a bathhouse. It's not like you can't do things of anointing for somebody you're not allowed to move, because then it would be different on the dead person. No, you're not allowed to anoint a floor of a bathhouse, because even though it's not an earthenware bathhouse and you're not concerned about smoothing out the ground, but it would be confused with an earthenware floor. Therefore, it's forbidden. But to anoint a dead person, you're allowed to. Regarding a dead person, we said regarding excrement coming back on the face, and that's why we say kol tzarech hames is talking about putting a glass vessel on the stomach. You're allowed to do that on Shabbos. Next Mishnah said you're not close the eyes of a dead person on Shabbos, and during a weekday, you're not do it as he's dying, because then that's considered as a murderer. Which the Gemara compared it to a candle that's in the middle of going out. You just put your hand on top, it's going to cause it to go out. We say you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos for a one-day-old baby, and also a related thing, you don't have to go ahead and protect them from animals, but you're not going to Mechal Shabbos, even the greatest king like David Melech Yisrael, once he's dead. We said a lion doesn't attack two people, but unless if the person is compared to Behemoth Nidbu, then it's Nimshal, then he could dominate the person. We had many different agats regarding poverty. We said that it's a galgal chazer, it's a wheel that comes around, and therefore you should give tzedakah when you could, because it's not going to be around forever, either the person or his child or his grandchildren. and we had much agatzah regarding becoming old and regarding dying, and we concluded with 6 types of tears. 3 that are bad, which is smoke and crying. That's why he said to his wife, why should I cry over the child that passed away? I'm just going to lose my eyesight too. And regarding going to the bathroom. And 3 that are good, which is from medicine, from laughter, and from Paris, like the smell of mustard. Thank you to Anytime for hosting us.